Alright, I'm here with another video today, and this one is one that I'll enjoy making this one. I'll enjoy talking about this one a lot. I enjoy talking about all my videos. But this one is very it can help a bunch of people, and this video is gonna make you think about skill in this game a lot more different. It's gonna make you think about the skill in this game a lot differently, or in that case any fighting game really, with the logic that I have towards certain things with fighting games. And I know Xenoverse barely qualifies as a fighting game, but regardless, it is what it is. So some people just measure like skill in this game based on if you win or not. They don't care how you win, as long as you win. That's what determines skill. So if you just let's say like pre-patch Punisher drive, all right, back when there was shit was cancerous. Let's say you just spam Punisher drive. As long as you're winning, to some people that's a win. They don't care as long as you're winning. But the thing is, that's not necessarily the case. Now, if that, I mean, I'm not gonna take away from the people that do that, because I'm gonna like spit some logic to you. Being cheap, being called cheap, there's not really nothing cheap in a game. It's just morals, basically. If you morals in a game, all right. So like, if you want to unvanishable stamina break somebody, you're not doing anything cheap. But what is deemed as cheap is basically determined by the community. If the community thinks a certain move is cheap, then, and the majority thinks like that, then if you do that thing or do that move or use that move or abuse it, then yes, it is indeed called cheap. Like Punisher Drive, that move was called cheap. So therefore the community called it cheap, and it was therefore a cheap move, but it wasn't a cheap move at all. Nothing's labeling it like that. All right, it's up to you how you want to use it. But even though still, you'll still get called cheap for probably using the move. So if someone is spamming Punisher Drive and doing unvanishable stamina breaks and using injury rise to action in a like moral sense, yeah, that shit is cheap, that shit is broken. But in a fighting sense, that's just their strategy and tactic. That's basically it. In like a realistic situation, that is just their strategy and tactic. Now, some people might think, well, then that person just doesn't have skill. And to an extent, that is true, because if that person, for example, is using energy barrier rise to action, then that person indeed does not have much skill if he can't play without it. If you play that person without it and he's getting his ass whooped without that strategy slash tactic, then yeah, he doesn't have skill. He relies on that cheap, well, quote unquote cheap, he just relies on that strategy and tactic. So yeah, in a sense, if he can't fight without it, he doesn't have skill. And if he isn't smart, that's another thing. For the remainder of this video, I'm gonna refer to as smartness in Xenoverse as technique, because it just sounds a lot better and it makes more sense. All right. So strategy and tactic. All right. The most classic one, energy barrier rise to action, straight from Xenoverse 1. That's a strategy and tactic that many like to abuse to get the opponent away from them and to retain their stamina and to possibly combo if they ever want to. Some people rely on that. If you rely on it and can't fight without it, then that's you rely on that. That basically what I just said. You can't fight without it, so therefore that takes away from the amount of skill that you have, and it shows that you have no skill as much as you think, because all you are is a strategic and tactical fighter. Okay, so maybe I'll explain this better without using something cheap. Let's say a person is a very passive fighter. That means he doesn't necessarily not attack you, but sometimes he just waits. All right, he just waits and waits his turn, tries to counter you, and you have to counter his counter and shit like that. You know, kind of mind games. All right, that type of person isn't necessarily cheap, but he's just a that's his strategy and that's his tactic. All right. Nothing, to be honest, there's nothing wrong with that. I can't blame a person for the way they fight. I can call them a bitch for it because they play cheap as fuck and they still fail at it. I will laugh at their ass and I will play how I want to play, but not necessarily. Like, there's different ways to think about it. Like, you can be a smart fighter, but you can be like Foroa. This is the perfect example of skill technique, and strategy and tactics. All right. So Foroa and Fomi in Xenoverse 1, they were very strategic and tactical fighters, and they were very smart. Foroa, he could outsmart you with how smart he is and his strategy and tactics. He would like that lock off thing. That's from him. That locking off in the middle of the fight, y'all just dashing around, and all of a sudden he would lock off, start dashing around the opposite direction, then use a random pearl flash, knowing that you would try to catch him. You see, that's the type of shit. He is smart, and that's his strategy and tactics. All right, that makes him a really tough opponent. But is he necessarily good? Does he necessarily have skill? This is another thing. Some people will say all those combined is skill, but no, skill is in its own category. You can be good, but that doesn't necessarily mean you have skill. You can be smart and have a good strategy and tactic, but not be that good at the game. You understand what I'm saying? If, let's say, if somebody, I'll use another generic one. Do you know those hit players that like to sit back, or not even hit players? Let's say somebody with a bunch of priority. Saiyans that like to sit back and just like whenever you are attacking, they just snap back and then do that little rapid kick. They do that knee into the rapid kick. You know how much priority that shit has? That's their strategy and tactic. And if they're smart, they'll like do that Foroa shit. They'll outsmart you. They'll know what you're about to do and counter your shit. That's exactly what I'm talking about. But are they necessarily good though? Are they necessarily good? If you get around their strategy and tactic, what do they have to depend on? If they aren't good, then that means most likely most of those players, and this is like some real life shit, like not real life shit, but some Xenoverse shit. If they can't rely on that priority, can they perfect block? Can they maneuver without trying to abuse the priority? Can they actually do combos without maybe repeating the same combo? All right. If they can do that shit, then they have some skill. But if they can't do that shit without it, then it doesn't even matter, because they have no skill. They only have strategy and tactic and how smart they are, or technique. So basically, how I determine how good someone is at the game is not just from their skill alone, because skill, technique, or how smart you are, like I refer to it, and your strategy and tactics is what equal up. Like you would, like if you could measure those in numbers, you would add them up and divide them by 3, and that would be your quote-unquote battle power. That's how I scale it up. Some people just go by skill, some people just go by strategy and tactic, and some people just go by how smart you are. All right, that's why in my opinion, Foroa and Fomi, they weren't I always said they weren't really good at the game, but they were smart as fuck, and their strategy and tactics were very fucking effective. That's how they were able to keep up with, at that time in Xenoverse 1, me, Cold Demon, Dino, Black Pain, Death Cruiser, Hollow Tips, Foxy Grandpa. That's how they were able to compete with us and like keep up, because if they didn't have those strategy and tactics and their techniques, then they wouldn't be able to keep up at all. They would have no skill unless they were hypothetically improve the skill instead. But let's say they replaced all their strategies and tactics and their technique with skill. Let's say they replaced all that shit and put it all in the skill, right? Like this shit some stat points type shit. All right, so they're very good at the game. They can perfect block better than, this is a hypothetical situation now. They can perfect block better than me and Zombie King. They can sidestep and maneuver better than Cold Demon and a Young Dino. They can key blast cancel better than Natsu Flame and Reapers of Death. So yeah, man, they got all this skilled shit. They got all the mechanics mastered down and all that shit. All right, but can they necessarily do it right? Can they necessarily do it effectively? Let's say this is the strategic and tactical part. They don't have a strategy and tactic. Like I said, this is a hypothetical situation to where all they have is skill, but they don't necessarily have the strategics and tactics that they had before, or how smart, or the technique that they had before. So what do you, let's get on the strategic and tactical part. So they don't have a strategy or tactic. So if someone does something that's a little off balance other than just fighting, let's say you're a passive fighter, then how are they going to counter you? They can perfect block, but what if you never like attack to the point to where they can perfect block? Let's say your tactic, since you're like a more well-around fighter, you attack only from behind, so that way they can't perfect block. All right. What are they gonna do? They have no strategy, no tactics. So what are they actually gonna do? They won't be able to do any of that. They can know how to perfect block. They can perfect block like a fucking computer, but they can't perfect block from behind. So what would they necessarily do? Let's get on the technique side. All right, they're not smart at all. Like I said, hypothetical situation. They have all their imaginary skill points in skill, and that's it. They have nothing and nothing else. So let's say if they're not smart, that means you can easily outsmart them. That means you can stamina bait them. You can stamina bait the shit out of them. And considering they're not smart, that's exactly what would happen. That's where the differences come apart. Some people might think that all concerns in the skill. Well, I just use skill as a name. You can call it whatever you want, but skill to me is how effectively you can do the mechanics and how accurate you can, like how good you can perfect block, how well you can maneuver, the timing on your back hits or whatnot. That's what skill is, how, to me, in my opinion, how I measure it. And that's what makes it different than every other subject that I use to measure how good someone is at the game. Just because you have nice combos doesn't necessarily mean you're good at, like, skillful at the game, and that definitely doesn't make you a smart fighter. That's your strategy and tactic. Your strategy and tactic. Let's say you want to hit somebody with a gravity impact. This is Nika's combo, by the way. You want to hit somebody with a gravity impact, burning attack into a death cycle bomb. All right. In order to do that combo, you have to do one of two things: stamina break them. Get their stamina low to the point to where you can, or you can do it and either make them waste 2 bars of stamina or make them take the damage instead and make them regain their stamina. All right, so that's your strategy and tactics. If that's a preset, then yeah, because certain presets, depending, you fight different with certain presets. Am I right? Depending, like some people have camping presets to where they have genocide shell and ill rain, and some people have combo presets to where they have to actually fight in order to do the damage that they want to do. So yeah, each preset has different strategies and tactics, and for that preset or for that combo that I just said randomly, that's your strategy and tactic. Doesn't necessarily mean you're good at the game. If you give a random that combo, will they actually be able to do it? They have your strategy and tactic, but are they smart enough to execute it? And are they good enough to get their opponent's stamina down? Are they smart enough to stamina bait? Are they smart enough to take a certain amount of damage or a stat vanish when it's right, in order to either not be stamina broken from having too little stamina, or to die from having too little health trying to conserve all their stamina? Do you understand what I'm saying? So yeah, that's how I measure this. That's how I think of the game. That's how I think of all fighting games primarily. But for Xenoverse, it's I think it's pretty accurate for how, like, this is a way to scale up. So if you ever wanted to figure out where your weak spots was, basically that's it. If you have any questions, leave it in the comment section below. Remember to leave a like as well. So yeah, if you have any questions, just ask me. If you want to, like, ask specific things, maybe one of you think you don't perfect block good, but you don't easily get stamina baited, and you can stamina bait really good, and you can do all the mechanics right in the game, but you just don't have a sound strategy and tactic or whatnot, or anything along the lines of that. If you want to ask me your weakness possibly that you might think that you have, or your strengths, yeah, just ask me in the comment section below, and I'll catch y'all later. Thanks.